Good evening, friends. Well, it's Friday once again, and I'm back with another tale from my collection. This time, a short peek into my novel, Tides of Evolution. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call The Lagoon. The Jeep emerged from the trees back onto the main road, and Troy turned left to continue their journey deeper into the island. The road began to rise as they came closer to the hills, and Linda started to get excited all over again. When we get to the top of this hill, start looking for a road that leads off to the left, she instructed. What's over there? Troy asked, looking to the jungle at his left. He could see the cliff face above the fishing camp they had just left, but nothing else. You'll see, she smiled and began watching the road. The ground leveled again, and a short distance later, Troy saw the road leading into the jungle to their left. He slowed the Jeep, remembering what the old man said, and turned off. The trees began to thin within a few hundred yards, and the ground sloped down sharply. He downshifted the Jeep to maintain control as they descended. As the road began to level again, Linda stood up holding the windshield. Let's stop here for a moment. He pulled the Jeep off the trail, and she immediately jumped out, running into the growth beside the road. He followed her into the jungle, watching closely for snakes and other creatures as he pushed through the thick vegetation. Following the sound of her voice, he found his way into a small clearing where she waited. Taking his hand, she led him through the thick leaves of a banana tree into a hidden tropical garden. To his surprise, they walked into an area with less undergrowth and more fruit trees. There were bananas, mangoes, papayas, and even a few date palms. Wow, he remarked, looking around. This is amazing. You said you wanted fruit, she smiled and pulled a ripe banana from a low-hanging bunch. Here you go. Troy looked around. He had never seen tropical fruits growing in the wild and was amazed at the colors and variety ready to be picked. He quickly gathered a few pieces from each type of tree, including a couple of coconuts that were already lying on the ground. Okay, come on, Linda said. I saw a machete in the Jeep you can use to open the coconuts, but for now, just munch on some bananas or mangoes, because we need to get moving. We still haven't reached the surprise. Looking around, he really didn't want to leave, but after seeing how great this was, and it wasn't even really where she wanted to be, he knew her surprise would be awesome. He gathered as much fruit as he could carry, using the belly of his shirt as a basket, and followed her back to the Jeep, where they put the fruit into the cooler in the back. She kept out a mango for herself and climbed into her seat. Okay, just keep heading down this road and we should be there in a few minutes, she said, wiping mango juice from her chin. Driving down the trail, Troy enjoyed his second banana, marveling at the taste. He had good bananas in Houston, since the ships bringing them from South America docked there, but this was different. Somehow the tree-ripened fruit tasted even better. The jungle thinned as they emerged onto a small beach, and Linda squealed with delight. It's just like I remember it, she said, looking around. Troy parked near a cliff at the edge of the jungle and got out to look around. They were within a natural canyon. The beach was crescent-shaped, with each side coming to a point along the cliffs which rose high above on either side. A few palm trees jutted from the cliffs along the dark porous volcanic rock, casting shadows on the beach like umbrellas waiting for someone to enjoy their shade. The water was crystal clear, lapping at the shore in small ripples driven by a cool breeze from offshore, and along the edges, small fish darted as they chased plankton. Linda jumped from the Jeep and walked slowly toward an opening in the rocks. Troy turned to follow her. The cave wasn't dark, but it was dim, making it necessary to remove their sunglasses to see. Picking their way across the rock-strewn floor of the cave, they came to the edge of the first pool. The water was bubbling and swirling from the force of the steam vents underneath. The water seemed to glow as light from the next pool reflected through the water. We used to hang out here in this cave where it opens at the cliff face, Linda said, pointing further on. There's a small pool under the rocks which opens up to the sea, and you can swim right down to the cliff face if you want to. How come the water's bubbling? Troy asked. There are natural vents underwater from the volcano that made this island, she said, smiling. It's just like a natural hot tub, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like this is what gave people the idea for hot tubs. Yeah, you're probably right, Troy laughed. They continued on past the small pool in the direction she pointed until they came to the entrance of a larger cave. Here it was much brighter, as the outside wall of the cave at the cliff face was open to the sea. A larger pool covered most of the floor here and bubbled like the first. What's that smell? Troy asked, wrinkling his nose. Kinda smells like oil, Linda said as she stopped and looked down at the edge of the pool. Well, we won't be swimming here today. Troy joined her and looked down into the water. Little brownish clouds were shooting from the rocks, and there was a film of oil on top of the water. He stepped carefully around the water, which splashed onto the rocks from the bubbling action of the vents. Looks like a natural well, he speculated. Too bad, she said, disappointed. The oil is coming from vents which blow warm water into this pool. I was hoping to swim here, but I guess we'll have to go to my other favorite place. Hey, what was that? Troy asked, pointing to the water. What? Linda looked where he pointed, but saw nothing. A large shadow just raced through here, Troy said. It looked like a big fish. It was probably just a fish chasing bait fish, Linda said as she took his hand and led him back toward the entrance. I told you, the pool opens up to the cliff face, so anything in the water out there can get into the pool. So how'd you find out about all these places on the island? Troy asked. Did your father know about them? Daddy? She giggled. No, he never left the comfort of the hotel. In fact, I don't think he even went into the pool the whole time we were here. I met a group of young people when I was exploring in town, and they invited me to go swimming, she said as she climbed into the Jeep. We came first to the beach here and then eventually climbed the cliffs up to where they dive off. Troy looked at the cliffs on either side. They were nearly straight up, and he could see no way to climb them safely. You climbed these cliffs? He asked, unbelieving. Yeah. She looked up towards the top. I was like you back then and didn't think it was possible, but once you start up, there are actually lots of ledges and outcroppings, which make it fairly easy. I kept falling behind the others because I needed to stop and rest a lot, but I made it all the way. And you dove off too? Troy was impressed. No, I could never do that. She looked a bit down. I was afraid to jump and had to climb back down, but one of my friends stayed with me until we rejoined the others. She looked off into the distance, as if lost in thought, and Troy let the subject fade as he concentrated on driving. She was continually surprising him on this trip, and he wondered what they would find next. Troy let the Jeep roll to a stop as he took in the scenery before him. The jungle formed a sheltering ring around a small lagoon. Tall palm trees seemed to lean in on all sides, casting shadows on the narrow stretch of beach separating the jungle and water. Several fruit trees nestled in colorful relief among the palms, and in the middle of the water was a large protrusion of volcanic rock. It thrust skyward like an art masterpiece in a fountain. The water around the rocks was bubbling, and he could see steam rising in places, reminding him of what the guy in the Jeep said about dangerously hot water. Linda jumped from the Jeep, shedding clothes on the sand as she stripped to her bikini on the way to the water. Be careful, he called after her as he began to undress. Remember what those guys said about the hot water. He finished undressing down to his swim trunks and reached into the pocket of his shorts for the keys to the Jeep. He didn't think anyone would be coming around to mess with them, but just in case, he hid the keys behind the gas cap cover. Come on, she yelled back over her shoulder. We'll just have to steer clear of the hot water. She ran out until the water was knee-deep and dove in headlong, swimming under the water. She swam almost halfway to the rocks before turning slowly to one side. Troy watched as she twisted and turned gracefully. Walking out to meet her, he was surprised to feel the water was more like a warm bath than cool ocean as he expected. It was much like swimming in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Texas in summer. He dove in and swam out to her quickly. Approaching underwater, he swam near her legs and wrapped his arms around them. She squealed in delight as she pranced away and turned to see him lunging out of the water at her like a dolphin surfacing. He landed back on the water with a splash and stood up to shake the water from his face and hair. This water's really warm, he said, walking close to her. I was expecting it to be cool, but I guess those vents are really heating it up. Yeah, I like it, Linda said and took his hand. Come on, let's walk out to the inlet and see what the water feels like there where the open sea is. Walking slowly through the water, they made their way across the lagoon toward the open water inlet. Because he was still concerned with the hot water coming from the vents, he made sure they kept a safe distance away. As they neared the inlet, he could feel the cooler water flowing past his legs and looked down to see if he could tell the difference between the warm and cold water. He gave up after trying for a moment and realized it was silly to expect the water to look any different just because it was a different temperature. Linda stopped for a moment and bent down to grab something from the sand at her feet. When she stood again, she was holding a beautiful periwinkle shell. The snail inside it was long gone, but the shell was in excellent condition. She smiled and showed it to him before tucking it into her top for safekeeping. Standing in the open water inlet, cool water rushed past their legs with the motion of light waves, and they could see the ending of the sandy bottom where the opening met the rim of the island. Linda walked closer to the edge where she could look into the deeper water and was amazed at the variety of colorful fish swimming there. Isn't it beautiful? She asked Troy, pointing toward the fish. It's like nothing I've ever seen before, he admitted. I've never been anywhere that the water is this clean. Hey, what is that over there? Linda asked, pointing to something in the bushes on the hill beside them. Without waiting for him to answer, she walked quickly through the water and into the bushes to investigate what caught her eye. What do you see? Troy asked. Is it something to eat? No, it looks like a small boat, she called back to him. You know, the inflatable kind, like a raft. She emerged from the weeds, dragging the raft behind her. It was deflated, and Troy could see from where he was that there were several big tears in one side of it. He walked over to the beach and joined her. Looks like it's seen better days, he said, examining the tears, and suddenly jerked his hand back. Ouch! He looked at his finger and saw he had pricked it on something. Linda looked where he had been holding it and reached to pull out a small triangular white object from the raft. Holding it up where they could both see it, she was fascinated by the serrated edges. It's a shark's tooth, she said confidently. I have one just like it on a necklace at home from the last time I was here at the island with my parents. Wonder how it got in the raft, Troy asked. Who knows? Linda began examining the raft closer in hopes of finding more. It was probably drifting and some sharks came along and decided to see if it was good to eat and lost a tooth in the process. You know, I heard sharks lose teeth every time they eat, and there's always a new tooth waiting to replace them. She finished examining the raft and started dragging it back toward the Jeep. What are you doing with that? Troy asked. I'm going to put it in the back of the Jeep so we can throw it away when we get to town, she smiled. Can't have trash littering the lagoon, can we? Troy watched her drag it to the Jeep and smiled. She was a good girl, and even though she didn't live on the island and had no responsibility to clean it up, she couldn't let it be. He knew he was lucky to have found her. Lying back in the sand, he looked around the lagoon, wondering what it would have been like to see this with her the first time she was here. What are you thinking about? She asked, standing over him looking down. I was just wondering what it was like when you first saw this place, and if you were impressed by it the way I am. Oh yeah, she laughed and sat down beside him. The first time I came here, I was with a small group of kids from here on the island, and we came out here to party and get away from the adults. We brought along a couple of bottles of rum, and one of the guys opened coconuts and made drinks inside them with the rum, coconut juice, and juices squeezed from fruit we brought from the little grove we stopped at earlier. It was a blast. We had a big fire by the edge of the water and spent the night howling at the moon. Sounds like a lot of fun, he said and got up. Wait here a minute while I get something from the Jeep. Troy jogged over to the Jeep and reached inside his day bag and took out the bottle of rum he had purchased on the ship. Smiling to himself, he laid it on the seat while he gathered 2 of the coconuts and some of the other fruit into a bag he'd found on the Jeep. Looking around, he found a machete in a scabbard tied to the roll bar and grabbed it as well. Putting the rum in the bag with the fruit, he walked back over to where Linda waited. So what do you have there? She asked. You'll see, he said, pulling 2 coconuts out of the bag. Sitting in the sand beside her, he used the tip of the machete to drill out 2 eyes of each coconut, and proceeded to squeeze in fruit juices and poured in a little rum. After a few minutes, he handed her one of them. Taste that and tell me what you think." She sipped at the eye of the coconut and her eyes lit up. "That's amazing. It's just like when I was here the first time. How'd you know to bring rum?" she asked, smiling. "Actually, I didn't," he said. "I grabbed it because it looked good, and I thought we might find a time like this to have a drink today. I guess I just got lucky." They finished the first drinks quickly, and Troy found it a bit difficult to drill out the eyes of fresh coconuts to get the milk out of them. After a few minutes, he gave up trying and was satisfied to refill the drinks with rum and juice squeezed from the fruit. Handing her one of them, he grinned and took a slug from the rum bottle. She laughed and sipped at her drink. "That same thing happened last time I had these drinks. After one of them, nobody could get any more coconuts opened." Troy laughed, sipping at his drink. It had been a while since he felt this relaxed and didn't want to let the feeling go. "James and Sarah are missing out," Linda said and stood up. "I'll be back in a minute. I have to use the ladies' room." Darling," Troy felt his mouth already beginning to weaken a bit. "I don't think you'll find a facility out here in the jungle." "It's right there," Linda laughed, pointing at the jungle. "See? Third tree from the left." She eased behind a bush while Troy made them another drink. This time, he didn't even try to open a coconut, but filled theirs with fruit juice and rum. She returned just as he finished, dropping an armload of wood into a pile between them and the water. "I brought the first load of firewood. You get to grab the next load," she giggled, laying back in the sand. Troy looked at the pile of wood and decided she had a good idea. Getting up, he stumbled to the trees and began to gather more wood. "Make sure you don't get lost out there," Linda called. "I won't," he said. "Do you have any matches?" "No," Linda giggled. "How about you?" "I think there's some in my day bag in the Jeep." Linda got up and made her way slowly to the Jeep. She was definitely feeling the effects of the rum now, and it felt like she was walking a zigzag pattern. Holding onto the Jeep for balance, she leaned in and fished out the matches from his bag and turned to go back. Suddenly, she was hungry. "We should have brought some food," she said, rejoining him, and sat down hard in the sand. "I guess we can eat the fruit, but we really should have something more substantial." He looked around them to see what was available. There were more fruit trees, but nothing in the way of meat, bread, or pasta. He realized suddenly that he could definitely go for a big plate of pasta. He thought for a moment. "What if I was to catch us some crabs or fish?" "How are you going to do that?" she asked. "You didn't bring a fishing pole or anything with you." He got up and walked back to the edge of the jungle, returning a moment later with a stick almost as long as he was. He sat down and began to sharpen the end of it with the machete. When he had a decent-looking point on the stick, he turned to her and smiled. "You get the fire ready, and I'll go catch some fish." He got up and headed toward the water. Linda took some of the sticks from their pile and made a smaller pile for the fire. She poured a little rum on the sticks and set the bottle down as she got out the matches. Taking a match from the book, she carefully closed the cover and struck it on the back. It flared to life, and she reached down to hold it to the sticks. A small woof sounded as the alcohol in the rum ignited, making her jump a bit, and she sat back laughing. She grabbed her coconut and took a long drink, watching the flames dance in the wood. It was going to be a great evening. "I got the fire going. How many fish have you so far?" she said jokingly, watching him stalk slowly at the edge of the open water inlet where they had seen fish earlier. He turned back and held his finger to his lips for quiet and went back to following fish. After a moment, he stopped and raised the spear above his head. He thrust the spear down and in a moment brought it out with a fish flopping on the end of it, twice as long as his hand. "My hero," she said happily, as he came over to her and dropped the fish in the sand close by. "I'll be back in a minute," he said. "One more of those and we should have a decent meal." He walked back to the water and began stalking again. After a minute or two, he raised the spear, thrust it, and was rewarded with a lot of splashing as he raised an even bigger fish on the spear above his head to show her. She was surprised when he was suddenly thrust to one side toward the lagoon with an odd look on his face. The clear water became cloudy red with blood as a large shark pulled him under and tore at him. She screamed and got up to run to his aid, but could do nothing as she watched it disappear with him back out of the inlet. "Troy!" she sobbed and fell to her knees in the sand. I hope you enjoyed this little peek into the tides of evolution. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you're interested in reading the whole novel, it is available on Amazon.com. There's a link in the description. That's all for now, but I'll be back again next Friday with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.